There comes a point in your life when you stop feeling the need to explain yourself to everybody. Not because you don't have anything to say, not because you can't make your point, but because you finally realize your peace is worth more than the argument. And today, that's what we're talking about. The kind of silence that comes with maturity. The kind of silence that says, I know who I am, and I don't need to prove it. Stay with me. Hey y'all, welcome back to Waves of Change. I'm Vanessa, and this is day 72 of posting for 100 days straight. And this is also the space where I document my journey of searching for an overseas job, building a brand new chapter, and learning how to navigate change with faith, courage, and a whole lot of grit. And today was one of those quieter days. I didn't apply for any jobs today because there really wasn't anything to apply for that matched my skill set. And to be honest, even the contracting roles are looking a little slim lately too. So no big applications update. No, I submitted this. No, I found the perfect opportunity. No, just one of those in-between days. And if you're in any kind of transition season, you already know sometimes the in-between days can mess with you the most. But even on quiet days, I still do my engagement hour. I still show up. I still like, comment, connect, and stay visible. Just because a day feels slow doesn't mean it's wasted. And during that engagement hour, I came across a post that said, once you mature, you realize that silence is more powerful than proving a point. I raised my virtual hand to that because the older I get and the more life teaches me, the more I realize how true that is. So that became the message for today. But let me stay on the job hunt for just a minute. Like I said, there wasn't anything listed that really lined up with my skill set. And lately I've been considering contracting roles a little more seriously. But even those have been slim pickings. And in seasons like this, it would be real easy to start second guessing yourself. To start asking, am I too broad? Am I too general? Am I too hard to categorize? Because I like to consider myself a jack of all trades. And you know how some people say that like it's a bad thing? They hit you with jack of all trades, master of none, and then stop it right there. But what they don't say is the rest of the phrase, though oftentimes better than the master of one. Now come on, that changes everything. Because I do have transferable experience. I have stepped into unfamiliar areas before. I've learned systems. I've worked within programs. I've followed directives, SOPs, evidence-based practices, structure, compliance, partnerships, leadership expectations. Now, I'm not out here applying to be a doctor or a lawyer or a dentist. Let's be clear. But if the role is tied to a program, if it has guidance, if it has processes, if it needs someone who could learn, organize, communicate, and move things forward, I'm almost positive I'm your girl. For real. But that connects directly to today's topic, though. Because sometimes when people don't fully understand your range, your path, your pivot, your background, they expect you to explain yourself. Now, don't get me wrong. When you are doing an interview, you are supposed to explain yourself. I'm talking about when you're speaking with colleagues or whomever, not in an interview session. For a long time, many of us do exactly that. We explain, we justify, we clarify, we defend, we overtalk, we overprove, we overgive. But maturity will teach you something. Not everybody deserves an explanation. Not every misunderstanding needs your energy. Now, there's a kind of maturity that comes when you stop trying to prove your point to everybody. Not because you're weak and not because you're intimidated, Not even because you don't have the facts, but because you've learned that some conversations are not really about understanding. They're about control. They're about ego. They're about baiting you into draining yourself. And once you realize that, you stop performing for people who were never committed to seeing you clearly in the first place. You stop giving long explanations to folks who already made up their minds. You stop trying to be deeply understood by people who are only casually committed to understanding you. And you know what? My good friend Margaret once told a younger me, Vanessa, don't waste your pearls on swine. And y'all, I didn't fully understand that then the way I understand it now. Because when you're younger, you think everybody deserves the full depth of you. Your explanation, your wisdom, your heart, your energy, your truth. But maturity teaches you that everything valuable shouldn't be laid at the feet of people who don't know how to honor it. Everybody doesn't deserve your pearls. Everybody doesn't deserve your deepest thoughts. Everybody doesn't deserve front row access to your process. And everybody certainly doesn't deserve a carefully crafted explanation when they've already chosen not to understand you in the first place. Sometimes silence is wisdom. Silence is protection. And sometimes silence is simply refusing to mishandle what is precious. Let's keep it 100 though. There was probably a time when a lot of us felt like we had to say something. We had to clear it up. Had to correct the record, right? Had to make sure people knew where we were coming from. The old version of you might have said, let me explain. Let me tell you the full story. Let me help you understand. Let me prove that I'm right. But the mature version of you, she pauses. She breathes. She listens. And then she asks herself one important question. Is this even worth my peace? And if the answer is no, silence becomes her strength. So let me say this clearly for the people who are casually listening. Silence is not weakness. Silence is not always surrender. Silence is not losing. Sometimes silence is discernment, it's restraint. Sometimes it's emotional intelligence. And sometimes silence is self-respect. It's the clearest sign that you no longer need outside validation to feel secure. And that kind of silence, that's powerful. It takes a lot more strength to stay centered than it does to react. And this doesn't just happen in dramatic situations. This shows up in everyday life. It shows up when somebody says something slick. You know how they do. It shows up when somebody underestimates your experience. It shows up when people try to reduce your value because your path doesn't look traditional. And it shows up when folks expect you to defend your choices, your timing, your standards, your boundaries, or your growth. Now, maybe in another season, you would have jumped right in, but now, now you know better. Now you know that every invitation to react is not your assignment. I need to say that again. Every invitation to react is not your assignment. I think this message hits differently in a season like the one I'm in right now. When opportunities are slow, when the path ahead isn't fully visible, when you know what you bring but the doors haven't opened yet, there can be a temptation to get loud in your insecurity, to overexplain your value, to oversell your worth, to panic because things feel quiet. But I'm learning that I don't have to do all of that. I know what I bring. I know the rooms I've worked in. I know the programs I've supported. I know the people I've served. I know my adaptability, my work ethic, my range. So just because the listings are slow right now doesn't mean my value is less than. And just because the opportunities feel slim doesn't mean I need to start proving myself to the wrong people. That's where silence becomes peace. And that brings me to the scripture anchor for today, because there is absolutely a word for this season. Our scripture today is Ecclesiastes 3rd chapter, verse 7. This is the NIV version. A time to tear and a time to mend, a time to be silent and a time to speak. This verse reminds us that wisdom is not just knowing how to speak. Wisdom is also knowing when not to. There's a time to speak up, a time to advocate, a time to address things directly, a time to testify, a time to say, no, that's not right. But there is also a time to remain silent. And maturity is learning the difference. That's emotional growth. That's peace. So maybe this message is for somebody watching who has been exhausting themselves, trying to be understood, trying to prove their worth, trying to explain their choices, trying to justify their healing, trying to defend their pivot, and trying to make people comfortable with the version of them that is growing. Maybe today is the day you stop. Not because you're giving up, but because you're growing up. Maybe today is the day you realize that your peace is too expensive to spend on unnecessary explanations. Maybe today is the day you trust that the right people won't require a performance to recognize your value. And if that's where you are, I want to encourage you. You don't have to argue your way into being worthy. You don't have to over-explain your way into being valid. And you don't have to prove your point to everybody in order to walk in peace. So friend, that's day 72, and I'm still showing up. Still watching, still trusting, still staying engaged. Still believing that what's for me will not miss me. And I'm carrying this with me. Once you mature, you realize that silence is more powerful than proving a point. Not because you've lost your voice, but because you've learned how valuable it is. If this message spoke to you, let me know in the comments. Have you ever had to learn that silence was more powerful than proving a point? Or are you in a season right now where you're learning not to explain yourself so much? And if you're on your own journey of transition, reinvention, or waiting for your next open door, I hope this reminded you that quiet seasons still carry wisdom. I'm Vanessa, and this is Ways of Change. Do me a favor. Like this video, subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, and share this with a friend who may need to hear this message. Thanks for joining me today. I'll see you all tomorrow.